In this video, I'm going to be exploring tooth number 22, surfaces toward me. I'm going to have the patient in a chin down position, and I am going to be sitting a little bit towards the front of them at about 8 o'clock. And selecting the correct working end, you can see that the tip is curving in towards the tooth here. This is incorrect. When I place it, the tip is sticking outward, sticking about towards me. I'm going to start, I'm imagining a midline down the tooth here, starting 2 to 3 teeth away. My hand is up and I am going to get modified pen grasp, starting down this way here. Once I go towards the interproximal, I'm going to swing my elbow in on the pivot to help me get into the interproximal. So I'm going down, rocking my hand, swinging my elbow in, keeping my tip adapted as much as possible because the gums are going to be, or the tooth is very narrow and thin here. And here I can just do opening and closing the door method with my wrist to check the interproximal. Bringing my tip out. I'm going to do that one more time, starting on the midline, imagining rocking motion, going to the interproximal, bringing my elbow in, keeping tip adapted on the interproximal, and getting up in the interproximal as high as I can, keeping my tip adapted, and bringing that one out there. For this part of the video, I'm going to be exploring tooth number 22, surface toward me on the lingual surface. Since it is a surface that is still toward me, I'm going to be sitting approximately in front of the patient at about 8 o'clock, and I'm going to be using my mirror to depress their tongue, but to also help give me a visual. With the correct working end, I'm going to imagine the midline on the tooth here, and let's get a better view there, okay? And I'm going to start by going down, and I will pivot my elbow out to help me get in the interproximal, okay? So fulcruming 2 to 3 teeth away, and down, using wrist motions to get up. And once I'm in the interproximal, I'm using wrist motions to go up and down the interproximal, keeping my tip adapted to the tooth as much as possible so not to injure the gums. And I'm coming out same way that I went in. One more time. Going down, keeping my tip adapted, pivoting and rolling, and up and down wrist motions, checking the interproximals of these teeth here. And out. For tooth number 22, surface away, I want to check my working end to see if what is the correct working end, and it's going to be this one. Now, this is an anterior tooth surface away from me, so I am going to be behind the patient. And I'm going to imagine a midline down this way, and I'm going to start hand nice and tall and just do windshield wiper motions. And I need to keep my tip adapted as much as possible. So going down, keeping my elbow out to pivot, and windshield wiper motions, making sure my tip is adapted to the tooth, and coming out. One more time, my midline here, going down, up, down, there, keeping tip adapted as much as possible, and out. For this part of the video, I'm going to be exploring tooth number 22, surface away from me on the lingual. I'm going to sit behind the patient's head between 11 to 1, and I'm going to imagine this midline down the tooth, and I'm going to down there, windshield wiper motion so I can get in the interproximal. My elbow is nice and tucked in, and I'm in between the tooth, going windshield wiper motions up and down, checking the interproximal. snaking it out. We're going to try that one more time. Imagining a midline down the tooth, going down in there, and once I get into the interproximal, windshield wiper motions up and down, using wrist movements to check the interproximal of the tooth, making sure my tip is nice and adapted, and slowly bringing that out.